I'm Anjanette Levy, coming to you live from the courthouse here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where we're on a lunch break in the trial of Alec Baldwin. He, of course, faces an involuntary manslaughter charge in the October 2021 death of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins on the set of Rust. The armorer in this case, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, has already been convicted of involuntary manslaughter in this case. She's currently serving an 18-month prison sentence for her role in this whole tragedy. We are taking your questions live, so keep them coming to us on YouTube, Facebook, and X, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. We have a great panel to take your questions this hour, starting with Bobby Chacon. He's a retired FBI agent and attorney. Also, he's worked on many TV sets and handled firearms, teaching actors how to handle firearms. Also with us here in Santa Fe is John Day. He's a defense attorney, and Safa Robinson, a former prosecutor and host here at Law&Crime. Thanks to everybody for being with me. An interesting morning in court. We heard from Marissa Popple, a crime scene evidence technician, being grilled about her searches of the prop house owned by Seth Kenney in Albuquerque. That was the supplier of the props and the dummy ammunition. And really the point that the defense is trying to get across in this whole cross-examination is the fact that the police never solved the mystery. The detectives didn't solve the mystery of how the live ammo got on set. That's a key defense theme here. And also that they're trying to imply that Alec Baldwin, didn't commit a crime here, and that possibly even Marissa Popple thought that he didn't commit a crime. So there was an interesting bit of cross-examination. Also, they were saying that Seth Kenney maybe was just a little too helpful when they came to the prop house to search. He just was so helpful in telling them, you're not going to find that ammo here, telling them, directing them in certain areas to search. He also kind of called her out on cross-examination, Alex Spiro did, about her search of the actual prop house and whether or not she searched everything that should have been searched. And she said on direct examination they did search everything, but then on cross it came out that maybe they didn't search every single box there. She talked about shaking things and things of that nature. So let's get to your questions now. Bobby Chacon, we have a gun question for you, really an armor/gun question for you. This comes from at user-KQ4HF8SE5B. It's a really long one. Why was Alec Baldwin pointing a gun at someone that wasn't in the movie, meaning pointing that gun in the direction of Halyna Hutchins?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's not really an arm. That's a relationship between the actor and the director of photography on set, and how they were. This was a blocking rehearsal, as I understand it, which means that It was a rehearsal so that the actors are in a certain place doing a certain action, so that the cameras and the lighting people can adjust the situation, the positions of the camera and lighting. So you're blocking it, and then they put tape or something on the ground for the actor to be in the right spot when they ultimately shoot it later on, film it later on, excuse me. So I think that he was taking direction from the director or the director of photography on what he should be doing. And I think you hear some of that in some of the video where you hear the director telling him to draw the weapon again, why it was pointed in that direction. That's hopefully going to come out in some of the testimony of people that were actually in that church when that happened. But obviously with tragic consequences. But he was taking direction from somebody on set into how to do that, how to pull the gun out, how quickly, where to point it, and things like that.
John, I want to take this question over to you, throw this one to you. It comes from YouTube as well, at JCC8651. Why was the director excluded from these charges and largely forgotten about in the media? He was shot too. I think that's a good question because Joel Souza was shot. He was wounded. The round ended up in his back. So why did the prosecutors only charge Alec Baldwin with involuntary manslaughter for the death of Halyna Hutchins, but not for wounding Joel Souza?
That's a really good question. And there's so much about the prosecutorial decision-making in this case that has puzzled a lot of people. I don't know the answer. No one has ever addressed that, as far as I can tell, from the special prosecution team. As a former prosecutor, I don't know why it wasn't charged as far as that. But I mean, generally, the involuntary manslaughter charge relates to an unintentional killing, an unintentional act, and that's what Baldwin is charged with. No one's saying that he intended to do that, but I think the fact that they excluded the Joel Souza wounding, I mean, they had an actual, tragically, they had a death that the prosecutors wanted to address through the charging process. But that's a really good question.
So John, I'm going to follow up on that with my own question, because we were kind of talking about this out here yesterday. Alex Spiro, one of the defense attorneys for Alec Baldwin, keeps focusing on, and he focused a lot in his opening statement on Alec Baldwin may not have intentionally pulled the trigger. And he's saying this because Alec Baldwin has denied pulling the trigger. But intent is not a part of these charges. So why are you even bringing that up? Why do you think he's doing that?
Well, and that gets back to Alec Baldwin making statements to George Stephanopoulos on ABC that as a defense lawyer, you're just kind of shaking your head. That's why you don't want your clients making any kind of pre-trial statement. So they have to deal with that. But in a way, it's sort of a red herring or a straw man, because the gun, the trigger, I mean, is the jury going to be focusing on this, or are they going to be addressing the bigger question, which is, why is Alec Baldwin even charged in this case? I mean, can the prosecutors prove that he was acting negligently on a film set where everything's artificial, everything is fake? It's a real gun, but they've got to establish that he had some reason to think there was something in that gun that could hurt someone.
I'm going to send this question over to you, Safa. It's from Twitter, from X, I guess is what we're calling it these days. At Jushilin Hiri asks, how expensive is this defense team? So I want you to give us kind of a ballpark answer there, because these are expensive attorneys from New York, the Quinn Emanuel law firm. Alex Spiro's from there, plus Luke Nikas, and a whole host of other attorneys behind the scenes, paralegals. Then you have local counsel from Albuquerque as well.
Well, I certainly don't know for certain how much the defense team is, but you're absolutely right. This defense team is from New York, a very high-profile defense team. If I'm not mistaken, Alex Spiro has connections to Jay-Z and Rock Nation and some other high-profile celebrities that he does represent. So pretty penny for the defense in this case, but of course can't say what it is.
John, what do you think? Ballpark. I mean, are we more than $1 million easily, I would think?
Well, look, I'm a simple country lawyer, and I can't compete with the rates that they're charging out of New York. There was a People magazine story that said that Alex's rates could be as high as $2,000 an hour. But, in this business, you tend to get what you pay for.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering. I mean, I'm thinking quick math just in my head, and I'm thinking to myself, it's got to be over $1 million. I mean, it's just my thought from beginning to end, plus, travel, everything all put together, and expert witnesses. Let's get to the next question. At Queen Elizabeth from Twitter asks, do you believe prosecutors wanted to take the case to trial in an effort to help the Hutchins family with their civil lawsuit against Baldwin? What do you think about that, Bobby?
I hope not. I don't think prosecutors kind of weigh in on those kind of things. I think he settled that suit, I believe, already. That civil suit has been settled. So I don't know that this trial is going to have much of an impact on that, obviously. But, I don't think so. I think there was some odd delays in deciding whether or not to prosecute. Me and my colleagues, were wondering why it was taking so long. This wouldn't be a very complex investigation to undertake. Because there's only one location and a finite set of people to interview about what happened. And so we were wondering why. And then, of course, charges were filed and then dismissed and then refiled. And then the special prosecutors were appointed. So I don't know what was happening in that prosecutor's office on the decision and why it took so long and why it was reversed and reinstituted. But I don't think any of those decisions were because of that civil suit.
And there are a multitude, actually, of civil suits in this case. The one with Matt Hutchins was settled. That's Halyna Hutchins' husband. But there is another one. Gloria Allred is representing the family of Halyna Hutchins, who live in Ukraine, her mother, father, and sister. So Gloria Allred's here somewhere. We had her on yesterday. She's here today somewhere. So he's being sued on multiple fronts by multiple people. Alex, though, 83428 052 is asking, aren't Stephen and Alec not on speaking terms? What changed that? Stephen's there supporting Alec. Well, I think that there was some type of, discord there for a while. They have political differences, but he is certainly here supporting his brother, as is their sister. So they've been in court the last 2 days, backing up their brother as he faces trial for these charges. From Instagram, Marianne Winkles, 1976, asks, shouldn't the question be who put the real bullet in the gun and why? John, should that be the question in this case, not whether or not Alec Baldwin pulled the trigger and shot Halyna Hutchins?
That's exactly right. And that's the question that the prosecution can't answer. They can't answer that question. They can certainly blame the armorer who's doing 18 months in a state women's prison. But they haven't established, and they can't establish, how the live rounds got onto the set and how a live round got loaded into the gun. And if they can't link that to Alec Baldwin, I think he should be sleeping pretty well these days, because you heard the opening statement, and there was nothing in that opening that made me feel like the prosecution can close the door on that question. It's just going to be an unanswered question. And if you're a juror in this case, how are you going to consider that in deliberations?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the prosecution's case proceeds and how they wrap this up. AP Gills from Twitter, or X, asks, Alec Baldwin released a reality TV show prior to his trial. How does this make him look? Safa, how do you feel that looks? He's an actor. Now he's doing a reality show, and the news of that breaks before his trial. I mean, is that the best timing?
It's really not, and I always tell my clients, as we're preparing for trial, less is best. We want to keep you off social media as best as possible. We want to keep you out of the attention of the public as much as possible as we prepare for trial. I think the thing with him going and having a live show now, he could be trying to gain sympathy from the public. This is a media case. This is a very high profile case. And so he knows, and everybody knows, people are going to be watching his show, including some people in the Santa Fe area who may ultimately end up sitting on this jury. So there is the possibility to gain sympathy. But on the other end, it's never really a good thing to expose yourself too much prior to trial.
Mm-hmm. At Knowing Samantha from YouTube asks, why isn't he facing more time? Why didn't he take a plea? Well, he's facing a possibility, if convicted, I'm going to take that question, of 18 months in prison if he's convicted of involuntary manslaughter. And according to the prosecution, we really haven't heard this from the defense, but the prosecution outlined in some court documents that they had made a confidential plea offer to Alec Baldwin back in I don't want to say the date because I don't want to mix it up, but they did offer him a confidential plea deal that would not have required Alec Baldwin to serve 1 day in jail or prison. And they said he didn't respond to that. This is all according to Special Prosecutor Carrie Morrissey in some court documents. She said she then learned through some sources that he planned to accept the plea deal, but then file a civil suit against the original prosecution team, the state of New Mexico, to distract from him pleading guilty. He was going to file the suit on the same day. She thought that was distasteful. She didn't renege on the plea deal or rescind the plea deal offer. But then she decided to rescind the deal offer. This is all laid out in court documents after she learned that he was filming a documentary and that he was pressuring witnesses to sit for interviews for that documentary. So this is all according to the special prosecutor in the case. That is when they decided to move forward with the grand jury process and refile that charge against him. So that's apparently why he didn't accept this plea deal. We've never really heard the defense, though, comment on that. And that's how we ended up here today. Let's get to our next question. We have, who's worse? Well, actually, no, we're not going to ask that question. That's not very nice. Jesse asks, the question should be, is an actor responsible if there's an armorer on scene whose job is to make sure all weapons are safe? Bobby Chacon, is the actor responsible? You've been on these sets. You've been on television sets. I've seen the photographs you've posted on Instagram showing you you've like instructing people. You have photos of you showing actors how to use firearms on set. So should Alec Baldwin be responsible here? Does he have any culpability?
Well, look, everybody in my world, everybody that handles a firearm is responsible for its safety. Everybody that holds a firearm is responsible for its safety. That's the way we operate. And when I worked with actors, and I've worked with Oscar-nominated actors on sets with guns, and our practice was we walk over to the armorer's table, we get the gun, the armorer clears the weapon, shows the actor that it's empty. He hands the gun to the actor in front of me, the tech consultant. The actor then repeats that process and clears the weapon and shows the armorer that it's wet. So they actually just did the same thing, showing each other that then I would walk the actor to set with the weapon, and I would make sure myself that it's empty. So we had triple redundancy. With weapons, obviously, these are deadly weapons. They can take someone's life. We obviously know that. So the utmost caution should be taken, and everyone that's in the chain that handles that weapon needs to ensure its safety. Now, in this case, you had 3 people, right, handle this weapon from the armorer's table to when the shot went off. One has been convicted, one has pled guilty, and one is on trial now. So the jury, I know I've seen a lot of my friends that are non-lawyers get mixed up with this contributory negligence, which is really a civil law concept. But there is a level of different responsibilities here. And so clearly the jury in the case against the armorer felt her responsibility was higher. So it could be a case where you felt like Alec Baldwin might have certain responsibility to do that, but it didn't amount to the criminal act as defined by New Mexico law, which I think says due caution and circumspection or some words like that. And so, they're going to have to decide whether or not he was responsible to the extent that it violated the law in New Mexico and the elements of the crime in New Mexico. So everybody's responsible. Everybody that holds a gun is always responsible. And so as soon as you hand that gun to someone, they're responsible for that weapon. Now, whether or not he's responsible to the extent that it violated the law, that's going to be a question for the jury.